Hi, my name is Alicia, and welcome to Mess to Masterpiece. Today we are going to look into the legal side of the medical world. And before you pause and run away, trust me, I promise I'm not going to get too deep. I'm just going to address some of the issues and questions that I've been getting, and that might help you be able to navigate better if you have questions when these different issues come up. So stay tuned. Just a disclaimer too, this is not any kind of legal advice per se, or of course you can't, just like we do with medical advice, you can't take this for as fact. Make sure that you check out with officials, but this is just some tips and guidance from my experience. So the first issue is the SSI and SSDI when you're filing for disability. So that process can be so confusing and complicated. So there are lots of people, advocates out there that can help you fill out the application or in your process that are free. So that's what I definitely would recommend, especially if you're coming from an employer like I was. And then went from trying to file that my long-term disability insurance had great resources. So they're out there. You might just have to find them. But that's definitely where I would recommend that you start. So, and the gist though, there's SSI and there's SSDI. And I want to explain the difference because I kept thinking it was the same thing, but it's really not. So SSI is for low income people. If you're having trouble paying your housing or for food, then normally you'll fall into that category. Overall, it's less money that you're getting each month, but you're guaranteed Medicaid when you are accepted into SSI. With SSDI, it's typically you have to pay into it, and so you have to work for a certain amount of years. For me, I was very young filing for disability. I think it was 24 or 25 maybe. So I was young when I first filed, and so I hadn't worked all of that time, and so there's other circumstances that will allow it to pass through or not, but it can be a long waiting process. So I filed in June of 2019, and it didn't go through until November of 2020. So with disability, it can be a waiting game. So that's why it's really important that you do all your paperwork right and get everything that you need in, and then continuing to follow up. That's one of the biggest keys. With SSDI, you can be on Medicaid, but then you can also qualify for Medicare. So after a certain amount of time that you've been on, or it also can be dependent upon your age. For both of those, SSI and SSDI, you can appeal if you are denied, and so that can involve more attorneys and legal fees and things like that. So again, check out your free resources to ask your caseworkers and figure out what resources are available to you for free. Next one is the fair housing. When I was in a wheelchair, I learned more about this. And so what you can do is if you are renting, especially if you're renting, or whether in an apartment or a house, most places fall under, they have to have, it's called reasonable accommodation. So that's not saying that you can destroy things and just take out whatever to make it fit. But if you ask, a lot of times they have to be able to make it accommodable. So for example, when I lived in an apartment before, I had an occupational therapist come in that was working with me, and she put recommendations. We marked it with permanent marker and like masking tape kind of a thing, and put places around my house that would be really helpful if we had like a grab bar for the shower or for the toilet, or she recommended that the sink become a floating sink. So they took out that vanity underneath so that I could pull my wheelchair underneath. We've got a shower head that was handheld instead of like an actual shower head, so I could take a shower easier. They had to build a ramp to go into my apartment. There's simple things, but it all adds up, and you don't have to try to do it on your own. I love the maintenance man there, especially at that apartment complex, because he actually walked around and said, hey, what about if I take off those doors? Would that be helpful? Or would this be helpful? And he was always willing to help any way he could. And so that was really very, very grateful for that, because it's not like that at every place. But you can, if you are renting, again, you can hold them accountable for helping make make different changes. And some are more reasonable than others. Like, for example, we had to build a ramp now where I'm living, rather than them building it. But again, it can be very flexible depending on the person and the company. I'm going to put some links in the comment section about fair housing, and so you have some information about that as well. Next issue is driver's license versus IDs. So I just recently made this switch. I have had a driver's license since I was 16, although needed to get an ID because I no longer qualify medically. I have no vision, and then I have had other issues that, strokes and seizures that I can't drive. So it's important though that you have an ID card. I discovered that I've ran into a couple of different problems because they need that number and they need it to be valid. So once you go though, it's not a huge deal to get one. You just swap out your driver's license for an ID card. I think I paid $18, which I'm in the state of Virginia, and was able to get that card fairly easy. So if you are wanting to get ahead of it, especially with the DMV now that you can fill out the application ahead of time, as well as some of the stuff you can do online. If you have to go in person, make sure that you make an appointment. Okay, so the next set of information is kind of a touchy subject, but it's important. It's part of life, and so I want to talk about it. The first piece of the document is called an advance directive. And so basically it's something that you can print off or a hospital can give you, and you fill it out. It has key pieces of information as far as your wishes. If something were to happen to you, what do you want to happen? Do you want to stay on a ventilator? Do you want to have a feeding tube? Do you want nothing done? Do you want so this person to be contacted? Do you want this? Any kind of your wishes. That goes on the advance directive, and then it's backed up with medical terminologies and medical personnel, and so they can they sign it, as well as it can have information like your allergies, medications. So advance directive is a really comprehensive document that's really important no matter how old that you are, so that if something were to happen, that you have a plan in place and you can get what you deserve and what you want. So then the next set of that is called a power of attorney. So you have what's called a medical power of attorney. They make the medical decisions only. They also have a general power of attorney, and that can do things like banks, signing checks, other decisions. For both a power of attorney, what makes them activated is that if you become unable to make your own decisions. So if I'm in a coma, then I have a medical power of attorney that can make my decisions. The important thing though to consider is that this power of attorney ends at death. So it's really important that you have other paperwork in place, and so if something were to happen, that they're not left with a mess, and your wishes can continue to be fulfilled even after you've passed. So it's what you would want to get is a durable power of attorney, and that ends once everything is settled, after your estate's settled or your bank accounts or everything is where it needs to be. That ends. So that's the other document. So those are different documents that you can print off online or have other. The court office was really helpful where we were in filling everything out. Also, along with that, again, I said it's kind of awkward, but kind of important to talk about. There's this document. It's called a last will and testament. And you can find the format of that online. I found a free one, and then you can plug in your personal requests or wishes or changes in there. And so that was really helpful. It didn't seem so overwhelming, because when you say make a will, it's like, oh my gosh, especially when I was 26 and they're like, you got to make a will. So, but it does, once you get these different documents in place, it really can bring a peace. And again, it's just practical. It's not saying that it's going to happen, but just in case. And that way, then your loved ones or friends or family or whoever is taking care of everything. They're not left hanging. So I felt better knowing that they have what they need. Also, it's called a deposition of remains. That's another thing that a funeral home needs. That determines whether you're going to be cremated or buried. Again, not going to get into the details of both of those, but it's important to decide which one you want beforehand. Also, consider your beneficiaries as well on bank accounts, on Roth IRA accounts, or what other places that you have money, stocks, or anything like that. Consider your beneficiaries, and so that way, then it would be an easy transition over if something were to happen. Again, we don't always know when we're going to have an accident happen or anything, and so it's really helpful to have these documents in place. That's not acting out of fear, but it's actually just being responsible. And so that's what I've learned, and it helps me just knowing that these are in place. I don't have to worry about it. So if you need help finding these forms or have any other questions, again, this is not legal advice. This is just tips and tricks, things that I've ran into during my journey. And so I'm always wanting to help you and praying for you. Please feel free to comment below or email me at contact@aliciascroggins.com. Till next time.